little about him. He is a renowned Indian artist, celebrated for his vivid and socially engaged depictions of urban life and the working class. He was born in Pune, 1949. Since 1970s, he has explored themes of labor, migration, and changing cityscape, particularly in Mumbai. So Kolkata crowd is also no less than Mumbai, so I think we will be able to, relate to his paintings more. His art has been featured in numerous solo exhibitions and prestigious group shows worldwide, including the Barbican Center in London and the Peabody Excess Museum in the US. Notable retrospectives of his work include Walking Through Soul City, taken in 1920, at the National Gallery of Modern Art, Mumbai, and Humsafar, 2018, at the Rupankar Museum in Bhopal. His paintings are part of esteemed collections such as the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, and the Modern Museum of Art, New Delhi. So, we'd like to request you, sir, and ma'am, Shanta Patwardhan, to come onto the stage. And I request our Dean, our HOD, and Shoma ma'am, to come to felicitate sir and ma'am.
Thank you. Oh, one thing. Sir, you can.
Okay, so we can start. Welcome once again, sir.
Pointer there, is it? Yeah. That's fine. Which one did you say was forward? The right one?
No, this is for the next one.
This is for the back. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, fine. If I have difficulty, I can just ask you to do the next.
If you want me, I can do it.
No, if I can manage with this, not to worry. Please sit. Okay. Hello, everyone. It's a big privilege to be here. I'm very happy and to know me better. I hope most of you get to see my show that is on at Tri Gallery on Hajara Road. It's on for 2 months, so there is a lot of time, but sooner the better. So, yeah, I'm starting with this rather funny slide. Just to kind of know how many of you, when you enter either design or art school, ask yourself, why do I want to do art? And there can be various questions, there can be various answers to that, of course. And I'm showing three possible answers, like it's like Van Gogh for self-expression, or it's like Diego Rivera to express something about society, or it might be like, just like Vinod Bihari, to explore the language of art. So I'm going to speak about my own work, but I'm not going to show you a chronological kind of progression of how my work has progressed. I'm going to focus basically on what are the triggers for my work, how does a work start? So my main impetus is everyday experiences. Then there are memories and there are ideas. So there can be three different kinds of reasons that a work will start. And then, of course, the consideration of the medium and the consideration of art history becomes an important element in every work. I'm starting with a few slides of everyday experience. Now, everyday experience can be of different kinds. Many of them are instantaneous, and you just see something and you know that this is something you want to paint. So this is an image of a person carrying his child and crossing the road. As I was passing by in an auto rickshaw, I just saw this person crossing the road, and it immediately struck me that this has some meaning. So it might be just an instantaneous experience like this, or it might be something like this. Now, this work is called Construction Worker Washing Her Face. Now, as I was passing on the road, I saw this woman by the tank. They have this big water tank outside construction sites. And at the end of the day, she was just washing her face. But the way in which she held her hands against her face gave me a sense that this had some larger meaning. So that is the reason why this work initiated another painting. Another question is about, are these lights all right to have? You are able to see the work. Two more examples of everyday experiences. In Bombay, there's always some kind of posh building, glass welding coming up with all the jhopadpatti around. So it creates a sense of big contrast. So the right side thing was initiated by that kind of image, where you like the building, but you also feel this somewhat kind of the contrast between the posh building and what is around them is always something that initiates some kind of thought process. It can be that, or it can be some very innocent kind of looking one here on a rainy day, like yesterday and today. But what caused me to pick it up, this site, I mean, it's an ordinary site of a rainy day, but what caused me to pick it up was that the tree and the building were almost at the same height at that particular time. Another week or another 15 days later, they would not be. The building would definitely grow higher. 1 week before this, the tree was probably higher than the building. So this was a moment when there was a kind of balance between nature and this kind of building activity happening in Mumbai. And that was the reason why I picked up that everyday experience. And it can be also very personal things at home. You might be seeing old people struggling to get up on bed or to pour the morning tea and things like that. So something very simple can be the cause for you to take up a subject. The main reason, what I'm talking about is how does one pick up a subject for a painting, you know. So for me, mostly everyday experiences are the source of most subjects. This is done with pastel and charcoal. So the medium can be various. Now this is a more complex situation. It is also an everyday experience, but an experience that you take many times. I mean, this is a place where one visits often. It's near a railway station, a suburban railway station. And what initiated me to do this was that there is different movements within this scene. That there is a movement of people going to the left, there is a movement of people going to the right, both sides. Then there is also the movement of the train which comes towards you, and there is the movement of the buses which are going away from you. So there is some thought of technical composition in this, that while you take up a source, while you take up a subject, can also be because you are interested in the kind of structure that this is creating. So here there are multiple movements happening within this everyday scene. So that is the reason one wanted to paint it. Now I'm showing you a work done in '84, which is called Town, and a miniature painting. Now, I mentioned in the beginning that art history can become an important role. And why I say that is that how much you see of art will definitely affect the way in which you progress with your art, you know. So you learn a lot of things from the way in which they have been done previously. Now here, for example, we see that in Indian miniatures, the horizon line is taken much above. Not like in Western paintings, it's taken much above. And similarly, for me to organize that scene of a town with a building activity happening and the hills in the background was to be able to push the horizon high up, to push the hills high up so that I can accommodate a lot of the town within that. So one was learning from seeing miniatures. One can learn from a lot of it can be a very everyday experience, but what goes into making it many times is the experience of a lot of different kinds of art. Now this, for example, it's a simple train scene, but it's divided in 3 parts. Now that division itself comes from an experience of art, that there can be a triptych arrangement of things, and then you can actually compose. For example, the left and the right are slightly at a different angle than the center. Now this movement, this twisting of or warping of perspective that you do, that comes from an experience of different kinds of art. And it helps you also to direct the gaze of different people within that painting. So there's a man looking at the woman, there is another man looking at the woman from inside, there is another man sitting at the window who's looking further away. This is the kind of thing that I wanted to say. Now, looking at art history, looking at old paintings helps you to realize that lots of artists have done various kinds of things in various traditions. For example, you know Max Beckmann in modern time has used the triptych to great effect and to organize different parts of a story in different parts of the painting. Similarly, in church painting, in altarpieces, you see the divine of the story of Christ in different parts. So that is another way. One also finds it in Indian painting, in traditional painting, that you can tell a story by dividing it into multiple parts. So your story might be an everyday experience, your story might be anything, but the way in which you compose it will be affected by your experience of what people have done in the history of art. This is a painting of Lower Parel. It's called Lower Parel. It was a bridge till recently. 2 years back, this stone bridge was brought down, and today something else stands in its place. But as you know, in the 90s, the mills were running, and then they started to close down one by one, and there was a long drawn-out textile strike in the 80s, which brought most of the mills, closure of the mills, and a gentrification of the land of the mill. What used to be mill lands were then started to be developed as residential high-rises. So here you have that narration of the way in which a city is changing. So there are three elements. There is the mill which has closed down, there is the high-rise which is coming up, and there is an old stone bridge which is a witness to all this that is happening. This is another example of, as I was saying, you can divide your story in different parts. So the story can be a complex story, it need not be a linear story, but here there is one old man, a Muslim man, and a woman with a child. They are telling you one story. There is a street fight going on the other side, and then there are people going and coming to work. So basically it's divided into multiple parts, like a altarpiece. But it kind of gives you a sense of what you can experience in everyday life as you move through Bombay in different lanes. It's called by-lane saga. So in different lanes you can see different things in happening in Bombay. So this is a kind of attempt to bring various things within that. This is a very different kind of painting. It's called Journeys, and it was done after a trip to Europe, where the experience of traveling in European trains. Also, there is a small miniature painting of Radha and Krishna, which we had seen in Zurich. And one was trying to imagine what paintings like Indian miniature paintings and their kind of dilly-dallying in forests, in Indian forests would look like in a European context. I've also used, for example, a split image that was caused by, these trains, you have a double glass. Whenever there is a double glass, two images might be reflected, and they're very close usually, but they suggest something. They suggest something else. When you see an image that is split like that and just overlapping each other, they suggest something else. So I was using that. I used it in a couple of other works. Okay, so that was about everyday experiences, how living your life every day can be the source of a lot of images, and also it can be, if you look at it from the point of view of an artist who has looked at a lot of previous art, you also get ideas of how you can present your experience. So that's the reason why I emphasize art history, that it's very important for artists to be very familiar with art history and to experience the world around them through different kinds of art practices. Now, the next section, excuse me a minute, I just need to pour a little water. Memory can be another source of, other than everyday experiences, memories can be another source. Now here, one had a small photograph of my wife and my mother together at a balcony. And for many years, that photo was lying in the album, but I knew that there was something special in that way in which they were standing, and that it could lead to a large painting. So many years later, I did this painting in which the different places where we had traveled, where we had stayed, in fact. Like before Thana, we were staying in in Nagpur, in different places. So all the landscapes of different places together and the landscape interior, the interior and exterior. Now here too I can say that there is an influence of a certain kind of painting that you see during the Renaissance. When you see portrait painting, a portrait of a woman or of a person and a window next to it with a very distinct landscape in that window. So that's another source of composition. So this is called nostalgia. This one is called father's story. So it was, the incidence was that at a certain point, my father, who had moved to Sangli, which is a smaller town near Kolhapur, so we used to visit there quite often. So we were sitting at the railway station and he had something to say. Now it so happens that with parents that many times there are many things that are not said, and at some point the parent feels that he must clarify certain things with his siblings or with his children, and so this is called father story. I would say that what is being said is not the point, but the fact that there are some ambivalent feelings that are being explored in this area, and so that big landscape in the background just points to a kind of ambivalent feelings of that time. Another painting which is called Transmigration, which is about family. So here again, one's own family, one's brother, and one's parents, and one's grandchildren. So bringing all of them together is a kind of way of extending that narrative about the family. And it's also a question of place, like from Sangli to Pune to Bombay to New York or to the US, where my son moved after some years. So just moving things like that and bringing all that narration into one and arranging the figures in a way in which they form one group, but each one is somewhat disconnected with the other, each group. Now I say memories because during the COVID there were lots of memories that were brought forth, and one of the memories was of childhood sickness, like when one misses school or when one misses school, going out to play, one just sits at the window and kind of, just spends time. So during COVID, when one could not go out of the house, one used to think of all these things. So this is a simple kind of drawing of that period. This is another kind of memory. This is a memory of a place. Now this is a place that where I used to stay as a child, and there was another painting that I had taken up to paint, which was something that was close to where I stayed. But I wanted to do a large panorama of that place, and I did not know how to go about doing a panorama, and I thought of this place because this place was somehow mapped in my head in specific ways, that I knew exactly where my house was, where my friend's house was, where the football field was, where the school bus used to come. So all these were elements that were clearly in my head. So I'm trying to show on the right side that mapping of landscape can be of different types. When one sees, nowadays when one sees maps from satellite maps, one can get a fairly clear idea about about that area. And but they are usually, they can also be like conceptual maps, where it's like on your Google map, it's more like unless you switch on to terrain or to the other mode. So you have a conceptual map where things are marked out, like this is a college, this is a school, this is a church, but it's not the experience of those places. While this was an attempt to kind of mix a perceptual map with a conceptual map, trying to retain the perception of each place along with the conception of that place. The third mode of inspiration, as I said, everyday experiences, then we consider memories. The third mode is thoughts and ideas. Now, your thoughts can be very much influential on how you conceive of a subject. Now, the subject here is working class workers, but they're influenced by what I think about them. I myself am a middle class person. I have not lived their life, but I have a certain idea about what their life is, and I want to experience it in that sense. So one's thought about what this is will affect the way in which you conceive of that work or conceive of that body. Now here again, as there is a certain kind of idealization of the body, and there is also an attempt to express a certain kind of, say, exploitation about that class. So it comes from one's thinking. It comes from what one thinks about these people. These works were done in the 70s, very early. They were among the first works that I had done. Another work called May Day Accident. Now, as you all know, May Day is celebrated all over the world as Workers' Day. This painting was done in 1981. And it was a period when the working class in Bombay was undergoing a lot of change, in the sense that the textile strike had just ended and they had kind of lost momentum in a sense. And other forces were taking over. For example, the Shiv Sena and certain kind of Hindutva kind of forces were taking that over. And the mill owners were very happy to kind of move the left movements away from the workers. So they were supporting the other movements and not supporting the left movements. So there was a kind of down run in the communist movement or in the working class, in the trade union movement. So May Day Accident is a thought. May Day is supposed to be a celebration of workers' unity. But if there is an accident on May Day, it's a kind of spoke in the wheel. So it's kind of derangement of that movement. So that's the idea behind the work. The work on the right, it's called Fall, and it's a post-liberalization kind of work where there are no unions anymore, and most of the workers have been reduced to casual labor, working on construction sites and things like that. Or like bhaiyas in Bombay, like most of them they stay 10 or 12 or 15 people to a room. They leave their families back in Uttar Pradesh or Bihar, and they come there to work. So that's the condition of the labor class in Bombay in the 90s. These works are done by looking at examples from art history. There are certain miniatures and certain other sources. One looks at the portrait. It's a stylized portrait, you find, but one is trying to imagine what would that person have been in real life like. Like even when one sees a very stylized kind of image in art history, one tries to imagine what that person or that figure would have been in real life. And one tries to reach that real life in some senses. Here again, there are some of the similar kind of things, and also a mixture of various dimensions in the time dimensions. So one is looking at the future, one is looking at the past, one is looking at the present, and one is trying to see what people look like through this passage of time, through the past, through the present, to the future. This is another work, very much a work of ideas. So it was done for the Kochi Biennale, and the curator in that year was Jyotish Kalab, and his suggestion was that one does work about migration. And It was also about migration of the planets, migration of the Earth itself. So that was his brief. So what I thought of was, in the first panel, the migration of the early migration of various, like one knows that many people migrated, like the human race migrated out of Africa, or there were migrations of races at various points in history. Then, of course, there is the idea in the Bruegel painting about Tower of Babel. So the story of Tower of Babel is something like people started to build this Tower of Babel thinking that they can reach heaven, they can reach God. So God, when he saw this, the story goes in the Bible, when God saw this, he was scared that, and he was angry that people were trying to, displace him or be better than him. And so he ordered that the languages become, the language that people understood each other become a problem, and he broke up the languages and dispersed people all across the globe. So that's the story in the Bible. But it can also be a story of our migration as a race. Like we were born, of course, on Earth, but very soon, and already we have seen that we are hoping to migrate to other planets. And there are quotations at different times. The first quotation is from, I do not know if, I don't think I have details of it, but from a poet, from a British poet who has written a lot about the migration of birds. The second quotation is from the Bible, and the third quotation is from science writers who don't agree about, like, is there a language common to everyone? Like, some believe that science is a language that any species that is in the world, not the world, in the universe, like if we encounter an extraterrestrial species, they would understand our science, because science can be something that is universal. Well, others question this, and whether they think that our science is specific to human race, and that it's human science not necessarily understood by other people. People in the sense other people from other planets. So the controversy continues, but a work about migration, a thought work about migration. I do have some details. The first work, there's also an image of aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf, and the migration of various kinds of people. Today we are seeing the migration of a whole lot of Palestinians into all kinds of other close by countries, because they're all being pushed out. So migration can be something that you do yourself, or it can be that you're forced to do it. You're forced out of your homeland. This image of the Tower of Babel, I actually placed it in the land of Kochi, around Kochi. So what one sees below is the land of Kochi, and you can see the mark of the BNL also there. And of course, an imaginary idea about, and there is the golden disc, which is supposed to carry all of human culture, that if some extraterrestrial being encounters this, the Voyager today has passed our solar system. It is beyond our solar system. So, one doesn't know. Carl Sagan is one scientist who's very optimistic that there are people elsewhere in the universe. We do not know yet. Another kind of picture about thinking initiated by a thought, that what is the romantic artist? The idea of romantic artist was very prominent for a long time, and it kind of indicated that a romantic artist is someone who suffers, a suffering artist. And while suffering, that his suffering is necessary for him to be able to witness the greatest beauty in the world. So you have Akamiruk's painting of Noshuwan in the Persian painting, and you have Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Virgin. So these are things that those artists in their period had to suffer various kinds of privations to be able to see this, to see the beauty of this. So today's romantic artist is painted in that sense. Is an artist as a split personality, essentially. That on one hand, he's a personality of instinct, of desire, and on the other hand, he wants to transcend himself into God. So that's the kind of tension that an artist is living. Some other ideas that have inspired work, for example, my work on the right and different works on the left, where you can see the connection between the Klimt work up here and the work in the ceiling that I have done, to try and connect sexuality and violence. You know what? One always comes across this connection in society, that there always seems to be some connection between sexuality and violence. So what really is that connection? And below is, of course, Goya's war etchings. Now I want to talk about paintings as such, a little bit about the technical aspect of painting. This is a large 28 feet, 7-panel work that I did about Bombay. Now, my problem was how do I structure a work so large? You know, it has to be combined and it has to be seen part by part. So my thought went to what one has experienced in Japanese screens, for example, you know, or Chinese painting or Japanese screens, where there is a kind of movement, to and fro movement. One also sees this. I think Binod Bihari has used this kind of feeling in his Hindi Bhavan murals. So there is a kind of movement across the work, across as well as a movement. So you have you have details of various parts of Bombay and how to link them. So my thought was a train journey from, say, Borivali or from Thana to South Bombay is something that recreates this. All along that train journey you experience, or for you all in Calcutta, when you pass from North Calcutta to South Calcutta, you see different phases of the city. Some new things being built, some old things still existing, some indoors, some outdoors. So all that is one tried to recreate, and one tried to incorporate new developments too, like a mall, and like the last has some air travel, but yeah. So there is also air travel, malls, office interiors, but the fact that in Bombay especially, what we call zopadpattis, like, where the poor live, that doesn't seem to go away. People are trying now today, in the last week, Adani has tried to kind of recapture that whole area of Dharavi and redevelop it. So they try to displace, again it's a kind of displacement where people have been used to living on the ground floor at street level, managing their houses in different ways. They displace them into high rises of 30, 40 floor high rises, and people feel very displaced about that kind of movement. But, I mean, we do not know how cities will develop. So that's the whole That's the full painting again, just to give you an idea how it runs. Yeah. A little bit about, that one was also about structure. Now a little bit about painting. Paintings can also focus on the act of painting or the technique of painting. So here the painters are always facing certain questions. What does one do about recession? Like painting is a two-dimensional surface. It's always on the surface. Now, in modern art, people have tried to deny that surface and have insisted on the flatness of work. But whenever one is painting, as soon as one puts one color or one brushstroke on canvas, it creates a space between the canvas and that. So you're always creating a kind of recession. There are two kinds of recessions, and I did a few terracottas just to explore this, that within terracotta, how does recession work? That one sees that in good low relief terracottas, a great amount of recession can be suggested within very little space. Like for example, Ghiberti's doors in Florence suggest a lot of recession, but with very little space. So in painting, for example, in the painting on the boy, there is a lot of recession behind his head, but the paint next to his arm or next to his body is just similar to this painting of a calf against a land which is rising right up. So the amount of space between the calf and the land is not as much as there is between the boy and the land, but yet how does one kind of manipulate this in painting? Or with different media, like one uses a lot of photography. So when one takes a photograph of a place, one does a drawing of a place, or one does a painting of a place. What is one missing? What is one adding? What is one kind of, so one tries to think about different kinds of media in this way. As I was mentioning photography, now you can see that there are lots of photographs in this left side work. So it's the same work, but that's the painted image, and this is the working image done on Photoshop, trying to add trying to make a collage of different photographs to build a structure. So photography can be used in painting in different ways. It can be used just as you use just one photograph or use a collage of photographs. But essentially what matters is the kind of structure that you will evolve out of these photographs. Then there is the question of self-portraiture. Like one looks at either a photograph of oneself and paints, or one looks at the mirror and paints, there are different things that one sees. Ultimately, when one paints oneself, what does one hope to say? It depends on your mindset. Do you want to project yourself in a certain way? Do you want to explore yourself in a certain way? Or do you want to just talk about whether painting is able at all to say something true about yourself? So the painting on the right is called Artist with Brush and Camera. This is another artist with camera. This is a painting called The Abstractionist. A little bit of background about this, that abstraction I don't think is that prevalent has not been that prevalent in Bengal, though there have been good abstract painters. But in Bombay especially, over 20 years or so, abstraction really held the roost as such. And the person that I was close to, the Dean of JJ School of Art, Mr. Shankar Palshikar, who was an abstract painter, and he used to like my work, which was realist, but he used to say, since you are a good painter, you will end up becoming an abstract painter. So the idea was that any good painter would ultimately become an abstract painter, which I resisted, and I said that's not necessarily so. I mean, for me, what is more abstract? Either the buildings outside, are they real or abstract, or Is the reflection of those buildings in that glass more abstract, or is the drawing more abstract? So it's an open question. For me, any realist work is as abstract as any abstract work, because it's the kind of structure of the work that speaks to you. And as I was saying, responding to art history, at a certain period, when I was in the 80s, for many of us, being an eclectic was a proud thing. That one was not looking for a unique style of one's own. And one was saying that, no, I borrow from various sources. And even today, there are lots of young artists who believe that it's okay to borrow from different sources. You know, there's no need to try and become unique, that you have one unique kind of identifiable style which no one else has. That was one idea at a certain period. In the 80s, we were more or less against that idea and said that this painting is called eclectic. There's an artist standing at the window looking at a landscape, which is partly Nansuk landscape and partly Giotto landscape. And then there are bronzes and stone sculpture. So he can borrow from any source that he feels like. Again, about representation, like you all know about the impossible triangle, the Penrose triangle. It's a triangle which is something that can't exist in real life. You can't construct a Penrose triangle. It's an impossible object, but you can paint it. So, I mean, where does the truth lie? In the representation, in the image, or in reality? Can you continue to say you can't paint it? What is this? This man is handling that impossible object. So, does it look like it could exist? It's just a question. It's not trying to answer anything. It's just a question about representation. It's called the enigma. So it's an enigma. Representation is always an enigma. You do not know if it is real, if it is when you look at a Rembrandt, you do not know if it's oil paint or if it's fur. You know, it's an enigma always. So painting is always like that. I think that's probably the last slide. No, there is one more. This is another image of an artist in his studio. It's called Erase. Now the artist is standing with a dirty cloth in his hand and is probably erasing the image on the canvas, but it looks like he might be erasing or putting that dirty cloth onto your face, the person who is observing the painting. So the reference to this, actually, the man in the background, the small figure in the doorway, is taken from Velázquez's painting Las Meninas. And Velázquez was the first artist to raise that question. What you see, is it real? Is it representation? When he painted Las Meninas, was he painting the king and queen, or was he painting himself? He paints as if he's painting the king and queen who are reflected in a mirror in that painting, which is in Prado. But what he was actually doing was he was painting himself. So it was kind of a self-portraiture, but it looked as if he's painting the king and queen. So that is the reference in the painting to Las Meninas. So this is the Velázquez painting of Las Meninas. That in the mirror that you see are the king and queen. Next to, on the right side is Velázquez himself. And this is the family of the royal family. So it's just a quotation. As I said, eclectic quotations. We are proud to do quotations. A few other questions that an artist is faced with. What does one do with violence? Ultimately, if one is doing a painting, one wants the painting to be beautiful, right? So, if one wants the painting to be good, if it's something that people want to look at, how does one paint violence? And one sees in Indian miniatures, in this Pachamanama painting by Abid, you see the most gruesome violence. What must that painter have thought when he was doing that? Would you have thought of, a similar question arises when one thinks of, in a museum one sees weaponry, like daggers and things like that, with exquisite jewelry, jewel work in their handles. Now people have gone to a great extent to make a beautiful dagger, but what is the dagger for? It's for killing someone. How does one resolve this conflict? How does one think of this? I mean, it's not as if one wants to give an answer, but it's just raising the question. So here I've painted that artist doing a painting of that killing. A painting of the riots in Bombay and a painting of killing. So the question of violence always remains. With me especially, I'm always troubled by the question of how to paint violence. Because one asks that question because one wants to paint, one wants to make good paintings, one wants to make beautiful paintings. Now when the pandemic happened, one was looking at the images of people leaving the city. One knew that their life was horrid, one knew that they were living a very troubled life, but one was making a painting of that. And while making a painting of that, one was ultimately, in a sense, aestheticizing that. So, well, the last painting, I hope, is about my own studio. The kind of questions that I've been asking, I just want to posit here that it's my own studio, turned upside down partly, but if I'm imagining that today I stay in Bombay and it's a fairly peaceful kind of place, there's nothing much happening other than building activity and breaking activity. But suppose I was staying in Gaza or in Ukraine, for example, and suppose there were bombs falling all across the street, and I was trying to paint, or I was trying to write, or I was trying to do whatever, some kind of creative work. What would be my mindset like? So one is just trying to imagine what it is like to be living in a war zone studio. This is a painting that's up in the gallery in Try currently. Thank you. That's all that I have. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, you can keep. So we have some time for questions. Anyone? Any kind of questions you can ask? Yeah, Bharadwan.
Good afternoon. This is Barota. I have a question. That is, it seems that in most of your paintings, especially paintings dealing with self-portraiture, deals with some sort of question regarding gaze. Question regarding gaze. Multiple gaze. Like, for example, you have positioned that camera just behind the portrait, the person. And again, another person is looking into the image. So there are multiple perspectives as well as multiple gaze. So could you please elaborate on
those was kind of exploring the idea of what the mirror shows you, what a camera shows you, or what a painting shows you. Which is more true and which is, at different times you feel you can trust. For example, photography, there was a period when one trusted photography in ways that we can't today. That one knows that photographs can be manipulated quite easily. So, painting similarly, I mean, paintings have always been the source of making images of people, but they can lie, obviously. So can photographs lie. And probably so can a mirror lie. So one doesn't know. So it's a question that representation is always something that is fraught with questions, you might say.
And it might be deceptive also.
Pardon me?
It might be deceptive also.
Yes. So I don't know if it answers your question, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
I have a question. It's like kind of a personal question. Like from your work, from the first kind of works that you've done of the workers and everything, you from being a middle class family, you are not from that section of the society, but still you are intrigued by their life, by their lifestyle. So as a person, I'm living in the city. I don't know much about the nature and everything, but I like to paint certain things. I don't feel that honestly I have much knowledge to depict those things, but in my honesty I like that. So at that situation, like how do you like convey yourself that okay, this is something that I don't know much about, but I want to like say it. Like, is that being
Yeah, I
truthful?
think one should trust one's feelings in that sense, that if one is really kind of drawn to something, some truth will inevitably come out of your statement. And for example, there used to be a time when, in Maharashtra especially, when Dalits started themselves to write their stories. Anyone else trying to tell their story, they would kind of look down upon and say that, you don't know our life. What do you know about our life? So it's not about I knowing their life. It's about how I see them, So if I'm honest with myself, that I might be distorting them, and that is why I showed those workers' images as ideas, I was influenced by Marxism, and undoubtedly I used to kind of idealize the worker, and in real life the workers may have been something else. I mean, there would be like scheming workers among them, there would be like lying workers among them, there would be all kinds of workers. Like in any class of people, there would be various kinds of people. But I would idealize them as a class. So, but that idealization does carry some truth. That is one point, one way in which to look at a certain class, And today, there are a lot of people who speak about Dalits in that way, that you do idealize, because they have been at the receiving end of social norms for so long. You need to, and it's not such a question of whether you have a right to speak about something. It's a question of whether you feel responsible for something. And if you do feel responsible for something, you must speak about it, There's no doubt about that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else?
There may not be questions, but even if one wants to make any kind of suggestion or any kind of statement, you're welcome.
Yes, may I, sir? Okay, so this is a question more for our students. You being a doctor, so how did you start painting? What was the triggering factors? And also, we are fine art students, like we studied fine arts, and still we couldn't manage time to draw and paint. Still, some students are still telling that they don't get time to work. So how did you manage, and how did you start, and how did you maintain your journey?
Well, it's mostly a question of what you really want to do. So to find what you really want to do, I started to paint when I was in medical college, and I just continued to paint all along, being a doctor as well as, and something connecting what our friend was just asking, that the connection with people was strengthened through being a doctor, because one was looking at patients from a different point of view. And being an artist and being a figurative artist is something like being a doctor. That a doctor, no one asks a doctor whether he has the right to tell the patient not to do this or to do this, or to take this and not to take that. One takes it as a given that a doctor has the right. Similarly, an artist should have the right to speak about whatever, So for me, it was a smooth kind of going. And in my generation, everyone, all artists, had another job. They had to either teach or work in advertising or somewhere else, whatever. So for me, it was just another job. So being a doctor was not all that different from right? Yeah. But finding time is something that one is absolutely, one has to work at it. And there is no excuse for not finding time to put in that, think of yourself as a musician. If a musician says he doesn't have time for riyaz, he's not a musician. So an artist has to put in like those 2 hours of work. Not that you're going to produce masterpieces every time you sit down with pencil on paper. You're just going to make something. And just making that something is very important in the long run.
Thank you so much. That's really inspiring, and for our students also.
Sir, what we could see that significant body of painting that you showed today means in your presentation. Yeah. But we also know that you are also avid means drawing artist, means you do a lot of drawings. So what is your take, means how do you approach differently means towards the drawing and towards the painting? Means, what is your understanding or your way of approaching these two?
Well, drawing for me is something that has to happen daily. It's usually more instinctive. It's more spontaneous. Painting is something that one works out, but all paintings have a lot of drawings behind them. That I've worked multiple drawings before I start to paint something. And I've always wanted my painting to become more like my drawing, though many times it does not. So, or vice versa, or my drawing to become more painterly, but it does not. So, I think drawing is the basis, for me at least. Drawing is definitely the basis of all painting, and all the paintings, there are multiple drawings that go into it. Even if I'm using photographs, I don't use photographs directly. I draw from the photograph and use those drawings to construct the image. So drawing remains at the heart of all activity in a sense. It does.
Hello, sir. I wanted to ask you about the process of your painting, because those paintings are kind of experiential in terms of as you see and as you experience the everyday life and the lives of the other people. So how do you approach your works? Is there kind of preliminary sketches and drawings, or there are photographs? And what is the process in that in the conceptualization aspect? Yes. And another question is that you are a very important part of the narrative movement. So the time period that you had started, you, Ghulam Sheikh and other people have started, it was a time that it was was the abstraction and the post progressive movement was also there. So how it all happened? Can you elaborate on the aspect of the journey of the narrative movement and the figurative movement that happened through it, and it is a very important part of our Indian modern art?
It's of course a very complex kind of story, but to put it simply, I'll try to kind of say a few things. For example, narration itself was looked down upon by all modernists. Like the work of painting, visual art, is not to tell a story. That was their kind of, their belief, that they said that visual arts is not to tell a story. Tayyab Mehta, for example, would refute that his works were trying to tell a story. But one could read a story in his works. And so that was one difference with the progressives or with the modernists. And with later, with the generation that came after that, it was mainly to do with, I would say, what the narrative painters were doing is talking about specific people, specific situation, and not general situation. Not man as an abstraction, not man as a general, like man at all times, not man at all times. But this man in Baroda, this particular tea seller or this particular fruit seller or whatever it is. So they were talking about specific people in a specific place, So that was the change that happened in the 70s. That happened during a time when I was just about joining that movement. I was the kind of youngest in that lot. But Ghulam and Bhupen were there, Jeev Patel was there, Vivan was of course there. So there were a lot who were doing this kind of narrative work, which was about telling the stories of ordinary people, you know. So that was the movement. About your first question, I kind of lost track. Sorry. Yeah. I think at the heart of it, there has to be something that is, one would say, clicked. You know, there is a certain pose of a person, or there is a certain, like a group of people, 2 or 3 people, a certain drawing, which you feel that this has got something about, something real. So that usually around that things start falling in. So around the drawing of a certain person, of one figure, or it might be just anything, you know, it might be even a thing rather than a person. But there has to be something that has clicked in your mind, that you feel that here is a core that one has to follow. And around that, then one tries to bring in other things. It might take a long time for things to come together. You might try various things which don't fit. So you just keep rejecting that. So that happens with photographs a lot. You have a lot of photographic archive and you try to put lots of photographs together, but you know that no, that core photograph that you have, you know, things are not falling in it. You try to sketch, you try to make various things, and usually the answer comes through structural, you know, like you need certain kinds of structural things to go with it. So one uses photographs, but one needs to kind of choose photographs very carefully. Another thing is that drawing from photographs and drawing from real life are 2 quite different things, because drawing from real life, which one has to do a lot, which is reduced nowadays, but one does still continue to draw. When one sees something, one makes a quick notation of that. So drawing from real life, you're actually capturing a certain movement, a certain relationship with surroundings. When you are drawing from a photograph, that has already been captured and that's been reduced to 2 dimensions. So you're trying to create space in that. So when you make a drawing from a photograph, you're trying to create space, while when you make a drawing from real life, you're trying to compress that space into a 2-dimensional drawing. So there are various ways in which this happens, but using photography, using Photoshop to put them together, rejection is a large part of all this, which I think comes naturally to every artist, you know, and ultimately trying to work it out on that particular scale on the canvas, because what happens on a screen like a 12 by 9 or whatever, it completely starts looking different when you put it up on a 4 by 6 feet canvas. So you have to rethink. As soon as you start painting, you have to allow things to suggest themselves. You have to allow things to happen on canvas. Sorry. And you have to just kind of, in a sense, let yourself go, you know, and allow spontaneous things to happen on the canvas. Otherwise, if what you have already got weighs too heavily, then it may not kind of go the way in which you want. It might become too stiff and too, you know. So that's the process that one follows.
Thank you so much, sir, once again. And I personally like the way you started your slide, that how we choose the subject of our paintings, real life experiences, memories, and then thoughts and ideas. Many times our students ask that we cannot think what we should draw or we should create. They cannot find a subject. So I think they can take inspiration from that. So now I'd like to request our HOD, Shonja sir, to give the final vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. So just an official vote of thanks. Sir, cannot thank you more for taking out time and being here with us and sharing your walks with us and the discussion that followed, obviously. And thank you, ma'am, for being with us over here. And the official vote of thanks goes to our Chancellor, Sri Shottam Rajyaduri, our Vice Chancellor, our Registrar, our Dean, ma'am, and my esteemed colleagues and the dear students for whom this kind of sessions we try to organize. And yes, thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
An absolute pleasure. Thanks all of you for sitting so quietly and listening to my
And finally,
questions.
the ritual of group photo. So the students, please come up on the stage. Let us have a group photo. Thank you.